We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting. Item 1. Information paper issued since last meeting. After the previous meeting, the Secretariat has issued one paper to members, the details of which has been set out on the latest agenda. Item 2. Item for discussion at the next meeting. List of outstanding items for discussion. The list has been sent to members. That's paper CB-1482-2026-01. The next meeting will be held at 10:45 a.m. on Monday, 22nd of June. The administration has suggested the following discussion items. A. Implementation of the statutory minimum wage, item 1 on the agenda, on the outstanding items of discussion. 2. Measures of the Labour Department to promote youth employment and the working holiday scheme. Item 3. Hong Kong's occupational safety and health performance in 2025. I will now invite the administration to come in. Now, according to the administration, to utilize the time most efficiently, the development bureaus will not be present today because the relevant item will be discussed in a subcommittee. Now, I will open the floor now. Please press the button. I will now invite the Deputy Commissioner for Labour to walk us through the paper. That's paper CB-1482-02. Mr. Fung, please. Good afternoon, members and chairman. Today, we are briefing members on the occupational safety and health performance in 2025. First of all, by way of figures. Overall speaking, with the concerted efforts of various sectors of society, the OSH performance over the past few years have been improving. Now we have arrived at a quite admirable figure over the past decade. Now, for work fatalities, there were some 30,000 cases 10 years ago. I mean industrial accidents. Last year, it was just 26,365. The injury rate per 1,000 employees has reduced to 9.1. Now, for industrial accidents, 10 years ago, there were more than 10,000 cases each year. Last year, there were only 6,486 cases, a drop of 40%. The accident rate per 1,000 workers has been reduced from 17.1 to 11.1. Now, for construction industry, which is of more concern, 10 years ago, there were some 3,700 accidents. Last year, there were just 2,400. The accident rate per 1,000 workers has dropped from 34.5 to 21.3. Now, although that's satisfactory, we can only do better. Especially, we still see serious accidents occurring from time to time, which is quite concerning. We will do our best to reduce the number of accidents and prevent them from happening. We will not let down our guard because the number has improved. Now, with limited resources in terms of manpower and financial resources, we adopt a risk-based approach to improve the OSH performance. Taking construction industry as an example, we conduct special enforcement operation targeting hoisting operation, tower crane, and electricity work. These are work types with higher risks. We have also stepped up publicity and education. As mentioned in the paper, there are lots of collaboration between the Labour Department and the OSHC, the Occupational Safety and Health Council. In terms of training and education, back in 2023, we have amended the law and enhanced the penalty levels. And we have been continuously revising the code of practice and the guidance notes to update our requirements on safety. That includes bamboo scaffolding, hoisting and lifting operations, and so on. Now, in the near future, we will make amendments to the laws to prohibit smoking on construction sites. Very soon, we will introduce the amendment regulations for electrical members' scrutiny. Now, we have briefed members on the situation back in March. We will amend three pieces of subsidiary legislation, and we will announce the details soon. Besides inspection, we have also made progress in other areas, including reviewing safety training courses. Now, since last year, I've tasked my team to conduct a comprehensive review on the mandatory safety training courses. Now, last year, the ICAC has discovered that some training course providers have defrauded the public, and some of the trainers were actually not qualified. So we have conducted a review for improvements. We have also reviewed how we can make the licensing regime more stringent to monitor the performance of training course providers. And we have also made some updates to the contents of the courses. Now, as I've mentioned, the OSH ordinance has been amended in 2023 for enhanced penalty. It has taken us quite some time to gather the penalties imposed by courts. Now, according to paragraph 40, we have conducted some analysis. So, after the passage of the law in March 2023, which has come into effect on the 28th of April in the same year, now the fines imposed on cases, the average fines for each convicted cases have increased from $165,735 to $296,480 since the passage of the law. But still, we consider the punishment in some cases too lenient, so we are working closely with the Department of Justice. For inadequate penalties, we reserve our right to file an appeal. So, as mentioned in the paper, we have filed applications for sentencing reviews through the DOJ for some cases. Some fines have been increased, and some other cases are undergoing review. So that's occupational safety. Now, moving on to occupational health. Now, first of all, the heat stress at work warning system. Back in April, since the Hong Kong Observatory has provided us with a more comprehensive set of Hong Kong heat index data from more monitoring locations, we have updated our system as well. We used to just refer to the heat index data gathered from the Kings Park monitoring station. Now we would refer to all 10 monitoring stations. Now, when the heat index has reached 30 for the Kings Park system, we would issue the amber heat stress at work warning system. Now, but if there are 4 or more monitoring stations other than Kings Park which reach 30 Hong Kong heat index, we will also issue the amber warning. That would help enhance the awareness against heat stroke Now, some workers have cardiovascular or cerebrovascular disease or hypertension, and these may not directly linked to industrial accidents, but we are concerned about workers' health. So our occupational health team, including doctors and nurses, have been working closely with other units to promote occupational health. The details have been set out in paragraphs 45 to 57. So we will be working closely with the Department of Health, the OSHC, and the Construction Industry Council, CIC, to do more to raise the awareness of occupational health to reduce the occurrence of cardiovascular disease among workers. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fong. Now, this is the list of members who have indicated their wish to speak. Mr. Cheng Pui Kong, Lothair Lam, Rock Chen, Chao Siu Chung, Chen Chou Kwong, Alvin Lee, Lam Chun Sing, Ken Wong, Mark Chok, and Lam Wai Kwong. 4 minutes for each member. Mr. Cheng Pui Kong. Thank you, Chairman. My question is on the heat stroke guidance, or the guidance notes on prevention of heat stroke at work. Now, Hong Kong's climate is very hot during summer. Construction site workers working in an outdoor setting are under huge stress, and there is a much higher chance of heat stroke. Now, there are the guidance notes in place, and the government has been stepping up publicity, but the guidance notes is not a mandatory set of rules. So will the government review the effectiveness of the guidance notes and consider making some key anti-heat stroke measures mandatory to protect workers better? Deputy Commissioner, indeed, the guidance notes on prevention of heat stroke at work itself is not a statute, but it is an important piece of referencing document. When heat stroke episodes happen, we will investigate to see whether the contractors and the employers have followed the guidance notes. If not, we would submit the evidence to the court in deciding the liability of the employer. Now, after the launch of the guidance notes in May 2023, we have been updating it. Now, like Mr. Zheng, many employers are aware of the hotter weather and how hard it is to work in an outdoor setting. So many employers are cooperative with us. It is important to make planning in advance. In other words, before we enter the summer season, risk assessment should be conducted to formulate a plan to prevent heat stroke, and the plan must be communicated to the workers. That would make the employers and employees more prepared and prevent disputes arising from misunderstanding. When there are pre-arranged plans, there would be less disputes about what tools and what equipment is needed. The time wasted on coming up with an urgent arrangement is not helpful. We will continue to monitor how the guidance notes are being followed, and we are collaborating with the OSHC to conduct a series of publicity campaigns starting in June. We are reminding the employers to conduct risk assessments and also provide the appropriate equipment to prevent heat stroke. The response is quite well. And the OSHC has offered anti-heat stroke or cooling equipment to contractors and employers at a concessionary price. Thank you.
Mr. Lothair Lam. The government has done much in occupational safety and health. Now, the accident rate for every 1,000 workers have dropped. So I hope the government can stick to this multi-pronged approach. Paragraph 17 of the paper says that in 2025, there were 57 written warnings urging the safety auditors and safety officers to do better. I'm looking at 2023 and 24. Every year there were 29. Last year that number doubled. For these 57 warnings, what were they about? And afterwards, what follow-up actions were taken to make sure the people involved followed the guidelines? Now, starting from last October, the Labor Department started using drones to inspect sites as well as therefore gathering evidence and investigation. How many drone flights were made? How many irregularities were spotted? Now, the paper also says that there would be an effort to make greater use of smart site safety systems. Do we have examples of such systems provided for contractors to use? Deputy Commissioner, I will make a comment on this smart site safety system. Now, the Safe and Smart Site system was launched by the Development Bureau and the Construction Industry Council a couple of years ago. Many sites have been using the 4S system. There's a subcommittee under this panel. Their members will be able to comment on the technology. So that would be for the Development Bureau. For us, when we look at sites adopting smart site safety systems, we look out for the implementation of such systems, and when the system is in use, we will be able to spot irregularities faster, and then the person in charge of the site will be able to stop such irregularities sooner. Now, but if a site does not use the system despite claiming to do so, we report the case to the Development Bureau. So in that case, that site will be stripped of that label. But that would be something for the Development Bureau to tell us more about. Now I want to give the floor to my colleague who can tell us more about enforcement actions. Paragraph 14 has to do with safety officers and safety auditors. Those warnings have to do with notification. Before a registered safety auditor performs an inspection, they have to let the LD know in advance under the law. We found that some auditors fail to meet this requirement. So we issued written warnings to remind these auditors to meet the deadlines, meaning letting the LD know in advance. This year, the number went up, or rather last year, the number went up. That's because we amended a code of practice on safety management. That change comes with a stricter requirement about reporting. So we remind auditors who fail to meet the new requirements on the use of drones. In October 2025, we started using drones. As at March this year, there were 41 occasions for the use of drones. More than 140 prosecutions followed these 41 flights. For irregularities, we issued 420 improvement notices and also 8 suspension notices. So the results are solid. Thank you. Mr. Rock Chen. Paragraph 19 says that for lifting or truss out scaffolding, the reporting is voluntary. When it comes to truss-out scaffolding, people work on external walls at height. So will the government consider turning this voluntary reporting to mandatory notification? If not, what are the reasons? And then my next question has to do with paragraph 65. In the second half of this year, the government will start using detection vehicles to investigate sites and also to minimize the risk of workers entering confined spaces. This approach warrants our support. So if the trial works well, will the government consider expanding this approach to other confined spaces such as sand pits, tunnels, and also sewage systems, so that we reduce the risk of workers entering such spaces? Deputy Commissioner. I will take the first question, and then the second question, Dr. Ng can take the second question. On truss-out scaffolding in paragraph 19. So this is mostly for renovation and maintenance works. We conduct surprise inspections. Our officers may spot something off and then they go ahead to inspect the site. Our greatest partner is property management companies. PMCs can tell who is qualified to perform the scaffolding work. Our requirement now is that someone performing the work needs a certificate. They need a purple card. Without this card, they should not be allowed to put up the scaffolding. That's why PMCs play a huge role. They are the gatekeepers, and when they see something wrong, they let us know. If there are glaring problems, PMCs should not allow such workers to enter the site, and if the worker insists on entering the site, PMCs can let the LD know, and then we can tell whether that person is qualified to put in place the scaffolding. We're also encouraging truss-out scaffolding industry players to take out cheaper insurance policies. Because of accidents in the scaffolding industry, insurance premiums went up. Now we have introduced changes and we have talked to insurers. Insurers can offer more concessionary rates, so that would mean cheaper insurance policies. That will help the scaffolding industry to comply with the laws. Now, Dr. Eddie Ng can take the second question. Thank you. On work in confined spaces, that's high-risk work. The Labor Department urges employers and workers not to enter those confined spaces. We can use technology to avoid that sort of work. Accidents in confined spaces occur often due to a lack of or inadequate risk assessment. So in the second half of this year, we will be piloting the use of unmanned vehicles for inspections. Those vehicles can help us detect hazardous gases. They can also tell us whether there's sludge in the space. And once you move the sludge, poisonous gases may be generated. The vehicles will be used in high-risk drainage works. We will see how things go. If the pilot works well, we will promote the use of these vehicles and explore the use of such vehicles in other kinds of work in confined spaces for inspection and enforcement. Mr. Chao Siu-chung. Truss-out scaffolding is accident-prone. often involving fatalities. My first question is something that I want to ask, riding on Mr. Rock Chan's question. Some years ago, there was a voluntary notification system because of the many accidents involving truss-out scaffolding. My question is, would there be inspections for all cases that are notified, or do you do checks for only part of the cases? And do we have the figures for the past 2 years on how many cases were reported under this voluntary system? And what's the share of those cases as a part of all scaffolding or truss-out scaffolding cases in Hong Kong? We're talking about the voluntary reporting system at the end of the day, so people can get away with underreporting the cases. So before we have a mandatory reporting system, what measures do we have that property management companies fully cooperate with the LD on reporting the cases? In 2021, the LD announced a plan to amend the legislation to improve the statutory notification systems for sites. If a site involves a project over 6 weeks and involving more than 10 workers, within 7 days after the project starts, someone has to let the LD know. In 2021, the LD was thinking about amending the law to change this so that even before the work starts, if the work is high risk, the staff will have to let the LD know so that the LD can improve its inspection strategy and ensure workers' safety. But there's no mention of this plan in the paper about this plan announced in 2021. How's that plan coming along? Will the effort on that front continue? Deputy Commissioner, on truss-out scaffolding, I briefly explained the situation in my reply to Mr. Rock Chan's question. The number has gone up substantially. My colleagues told me that the security guards from property management companies kept reporting more and more cases. We cannot inspect every single one of those sites, which may be in the thousands, but we do inspect some of them based on a risk-based approach. Larger property management companies are more cooperative. Things get trickier for single-block buildings. We hope that property management companies of single-block buildings and their management companies can cooperate with us to minimize the risk about the truss-out scaffolding. On the enforcement and figures, the Assistant Commissioner can tell us more. On the number of cases reported over the past 2 years, in 2024, the Property Management Companies Association reported 5,173 cases of truss-out scaffolding. For 2025, that number went up to 12,556 cases. The number jumped over the past couple of years because of a step taken in partnership with the Property Management Services Authority. They issued the guidance, and we also provided a reporting form. Members of the Property Management Company Authority will have to follow the reporting form. 5 days before the work start, the LD got alerted. That explains the jump in the number of cases reported. And since the number is huge, we check some of the sites. we check 20% of the cases. That's still a sizable figure. It's a fifth of all cases. The requirement is now part of the code of practice. So the property management companies voluntarily report those cases.
Can I invite a response from the government concerning my second question, that is on improving the notification mechanism of the 4S? You have been studying that for several years by now. Now, with the support from the property management sector, we will analyze the statistics in recent years. Now, risk can change with time, so we will consider the next step after analyzing the statistics. Mr. Chen Chou-Kwong, thank you. The number of accidents has decreased. It shows that the publicity and education effort has paid off. However, fatal accidents has been on the rise, and we don't want to see even one fatal accident. So it seems that we are still relying on voluntary monitoring and notification by the market itself. For example, the safety inspector. The position holder is hired by the contractor itself. So you really can't expect the safety inspector to report all the problems to the employers. So would the government establish a separate mechanism so that safety inspectors are independent consultants who are not working for the contractors? And also the fine level is not too high. So some contractors are treating those fines as part of their operating costs. So would the government enhance the penalty level? Commissioner, now in 2023, since the amendments of the law, fines have increased significantly. But that very much depends on how the court deals with the cases. Now we have increased additional venue to prosecute serious cases through indicted offense. But there is still no precedence yet, because the police will also take prosecutorial action against very serious cases through the offense of manslaughter. However, there's a trend of higher and higher fines being imposed. So we will continue to monitor the situation and see if the fines are deterrent enough. We will make sure that employers understand how serious the consequences are. Now, in punishing rules-breaking companies, it's not just our job. The Development Bureau also takes action against bid winners of government contracts. If there are serious industrial accidents, they would render the contractors ineligible for future government contracts. And also there is a point deduction system. So in terms of maintaining occupational safety, it's not just the Labor Department's efforts. We have a lot of partners to drive the message of safety deeper. Mr. Wan? Thank you. Concerning the roles played by the safety inspector engaged by contractors, under the existing legislation, the main responsibility holders are the employees, the contractors, and the employers. We are aware that not all contractors and employers are aware of the requirements of the law. So under the existing framework, we require contractors of a certain scale to hire an on-site safety supervisor. That safety supervisor's role is to advise the contractors and employers on the measures required to fulfill the requirements of the law. So the role of the safety supervisor is an advisory role on how to comply with the law. So it would be more appropriate for the employer to engage a RSO, because different contractors are more familiar with a certain type of work and apparatus. So they would be in a better position to hire the relevant professionals to advise them on how to comply with the law's requirements. Mr. Alvin Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the government for their work to reduce the number of industrial accidents as a whole. But I'm still concerned about the number of fatal accidents. Now, concerning fine and prosecutions initiated, I'm concerned about the fines imposed on fatal accidents. Now, the average fine is $296,000. Now, despite the amendments of the law, we still see a gap between public's expectation and the actual fine imposed. So you mentioned that both the police and the DOJ would take prosecutorial actions. So how can these two departments work together to ensure that a more hefty fine is imposed? Now this year there has been 16 fatal accidents so far. So there is a very detailed breakdown concerning the type of accidents. Many of these accidents result from negligence and carelessness. Since we want to prevent the occurrence of accidents, how can we make the publicity efforts count? So my suggestion is formulate more targeted publicity strategies for the more common types of accidents. And also we have to target the specific industries and jobs that these accidents occur in. So for more high-risk occupations and job types, we can enhance the level of publicity. Deputy Commissioner, thank you. I will take the first part of the question and I will invite Dr. Ng to supplement. Now, as I've explained to members, in 2023, we have ramped up the maximum fines for OSH-related offenses. Now, for ordinary cases, that is summons in court, the maximum fine is $3 million. For extremely serious cases, the maximum fine can go as high as $10 million. So that's the two-tier system we have. Now, another milestone is that we would prosecute. After evidence gathering by the DOJ, the courts would decide on the fine based on the evidence available. So we would convince the courts to impose a suitable fine by stating how serious the cases are. Now, if the fines are too lenient, there would be some criticism in media reports as well. If the fines are unreasonably low, we will seek a sentencing review through the DOJ. Now, as I've said, some cases are still being processed and the true effect of the amendments is still to be seen. Now, in the future, when there are cases prosecuted through indicted offense, we can truly see the power of the law. Dr. Eddie Ng, thank you for the question. Now, in terms of publicity, the Labor Department has been making every effort. Now, when there are new requirements by the law, as well as when there are accidents which have occurred, we will immediately send an alert to the relevant employers and employees to avoid tragedies from happening again. And also, we have created videos as well as cartoons for publicity purpose. Now, by April, 31 videos have been created by the Labor Department. These have been uploaded to our website, as well as through other channels as well, including newspapers, television channels, and radio. And sometimes we will even advertise our safety message in football games. Now, from time to time, we would update our codes of practice, after which publicity work would be conducted, including issuing press releases, APIs, and so on. Now, the OSHC is our close partner. Every year, we spend a lot of resources to enhance the safety awareness for risky jobs, including work at height. Some examples have been given in the paper. Ms. Lam Shen-Sing, the Deputy Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I have two sets of questions. The first group is on heat stroke warning. Now, it is good that we have more monitoring stations now. Now, some workers working on airport aprons have been exposed to heat. And together with the exhaust from aircrafts, the temperature can go as high as 40 degrees Celsius, but still an amber warning is absent. Now, if the new monitoring station, for example, the monitoring station at Chelab Kok, can review the actual high temperature in the airports, that would allow the workers to take rest more often. Now, at present, only amber alerts are available. So after a warning is issued, workers can take a rest for 15 to 20 minutes, but that can be offset by some measures taken by the employers. Now, we have a score of days with extremely hot weather warning every year, but we still haven't seen a red or black warning being issued. So is that even possible? Now, there has been some 42 occasions where unmanned aircrafts have been deployed for law enforcement. So that sounds good. We will deploy unmanned aircrafts to more remote and high-risk areas for inspection. And also, is the infrared thermal system installed in drones sufficient for detecting smoking in construction sites? Can that be implemented together with the law amendment?
Deputy Commissioner, on the first question, I want to share some observations. My first job was at the airport. It was at Kai Tak. At the taxiway and the apron, it was very hot. at Czech Babcock, there was a heat stress detector. But the number of detectors is beside the point. What matters is that someone assesses the situation and then they take precautions to prevent heat stroke for airport workers. I have been to the airport on multiple occasions to find out about the situation. I also met with the management of the airport authority. They have been taking more and more steps to prevent heat stroke at the airport. There were areas for workers to take a break or stay hydrated. There is also publicity. They also hand out cooling supplies. So there is great awareness of protecting workers against heat stroke. Again, it's the risk assessment and the precautions that truly matter. The warning itself is beside the point. It's the precautions and the assessment that matter. Now on drones, my colleague can take the question. Last October, we started using drones. We're now familiarizing ourselves with the drones. In the future, we will see how we can expand the scope of the drones applications. The Labor Department is buying drones equipped with infrared systems. We're talking about a different model of drones. You cannot just retrofit infrared systems on drones. We're going through the procurement exercise. Now, if the law about the smoking ban is passed, we're trying to adopt the drones to assist with enforcement by mid-July. Mr. Ken Wong. The paper mentions revising the code of practice about truss-out scaffolding and also enhancing the safety of work on bamboo scaffolding. We welcome such references. At the Wangfu Court, one of the reasons for the fire was something wrong with the scaffolding itself. Other sites are now using metal scaffolding. For work at height, a risk factor is unsafe scaffolding. Will the government consider partnerships with local universities about using more fire-resistant and water-resistant structures? Can we use materials that are even sturdier than metal scaffolding? If we can adopt new technology, we can preserve this tradition of using bamboo scaffolding while also enhancing occupational safety and health. SMEs sometimes lack occupational safety and health awareness. Can we impose minimum requirements on SMEs about OSH before allowing them to take on projects? Deputy Commissioner. Contractors have to meet the safety requirements regardless of the kind of scaffolding they use. The point is to make sure that the workers are safe. Carelessness and neglect give rise to accidents. From the accidents over the past 2 years, we saw problems with the procedures or lax supervision. That's why last year there was a meeting involving the scaffolding industry and experts. We are revising our code of practice and implementing it. And in light of the fire at Wangford Court, we are considering further amendments to our code of practice so that the materials used are fire retardant. On small and medium enterprises, it really depends on the ability of each company when it comes to the project they are awarded. I cannot answer on behalf of the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau. Different projects have different requirements for potential contractors. Some companies may be too small to take part in a tendering exercise. On publicity, we will redouble our effort. The OSHC is also working with us on this. They have this Star Enterprise initiative, so companies can work towards this kind of accreditation. The OSHC looks at the performance of these companies. If the companies meet the mark, they get the accreditation, and then these companies can tell their customers that they can perform certain kinds of works. Mr. Mark Chong. I got a couple of questions. I'm looking at the fatality figures. Over the past 6 years, there were 1,555 fatalities. A closer look shows that it's a usual suspect when it comes to the industries. In the construction, warehousing, postal and courier, real estate, import and export, wholesale and retail. Altogether, there were 1,152 fatalities, over 70% of the total. Why do we see no improvement over the years? Every time when there is a fatality, the Labor Department follows up. But the LD cannot regulate these industries. The LD is in no position to make those regulators introduce legislative changes. The LD only gives advice. It's not mandatory in nature. How can you make sure people comply with it? Do you hold meetings with different parties? Can we ask those parties to introduce legislation with harsher penalties? Can we get them to step up training for staff members? Now, paragraph 25 mentions that the LD is revising the code of practice on the use of tower cranes. The revisions cover the safety requirements and supervision of tower cranes design and installation. On the previous occasion, I made this point. Based on the existing requirements, once you use the tower crane for over 15 years, you have to hire an authorized person to conduct a non-destructive test. All that it takes for monthly and annual inspections is just a visual inspection. So I suggest a non-destructive test at the bottom for tower cranes, especially for the joint. I was told that a checklist would be drawn up for the industry to refer to. So for non-destructive tests involving cranes, what plans do we have to enhance the supervision? Will the checklist incorporate our suggestions? I want to clarify something about the first point. Every year there are hundreds of fatalities. Most of them have nothing to do with industrial accidents. A white-collar worker in an office may pass out because of a heart attack or some other underlying disease. This worker passes away during work, and that death will count towards the total. That's why you see a huge number. But most of these cases are not industrial accidents. Paragraph 3 shows work fatalities. Every year there were 20 to 30-ish cases, maybe 2/3 of them, meaning 20 cases or so, are industrial accidents, maybe on a construction site or in a factory. For the remainder, those deaths have to do with other industries, someone dying on the line of duty, or a property management company security guard falls and hurt their head. So where do we see the number of hundreds of deaths every year? This has to do with fatality compensation. We have a team of workers specifically on that work. On lifting operation, the Assistant Commissioner can tell us more about that. The member mentioned the code of practice about tower cranes. The existing requirements are such that the employer and the contractor to perform non-destructive tests or NDTs for the tower crane using ultrasonic technology. Even before the crane arrives at the site from the workshop, there is merit with doing the check before the crane leaves the workshop. Because once the crane arrives on site, you assemble everything, checking will be difficult. But at the workshop, the components are apart, so you can do more detailed checks. The current amendment also has a focus on the checklist. Qualified persons and engineers have to check the cranes. So what do they look out for? That checklist to come will set out in detail the items to look out for, meaning that even before the checklist is signed, the professionals will have to look out for those specific items before they sign. Mr. Lim Wai-Kong. My first question has to do with death from overwork. Annex 2 says that in 2025 there were 273 fatalities. 240 such deaths were of natural causes or something that happened on board a vessel or that happened outside Hong Kong. So do we have figures on sudden death during work? Will we look at the experience of Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan about death from overwork? My next question has to do with getting off work during adverse weather. Will the government consider work suspension arrangements for adverse weather, especially for non-essential services? My next question has to do with occupational diseases. The current list of occupational diseases was drawn up many years ago. Now, for certain operators of machines, they may have spinal disc conditions. And then for workers who have to stand all day, they may have problems with their veins. Will we consider updating the list? Now, my next question has to do with road repair. Recently, at the Chiang Mai Bridge, a worker lost their life. This worker was replacing the tire of a vehicle, not in road repair. There's protection for workers performing road repair. So can we come up with measures to protect such workers?
Deputy Commissioner, please. Now, first of all, let me answer the question on bad weather. It's not mentioned in the paper because another team in the Labor Department is responsible for bad weather arrangements for work. Now, the spirit is coming up with a pre-agreed arrangements between the employers and employees for working in extreme weather. Now, concerning the question on sudden death and occupational disease, I will defer to Dr. Chow. Dr. Ng. Thank you. Now, there is a mechanism that whenever there is death at workplace, then according to the Employee Compensation Ordinance, the employers must report the death to the Labor Department. Now, the Occupational Safety and Health section would conduct an investigation into the reason of death. Our team would also visit the workplace to investigate whether the death is related to work directly or whether it is an episode of cardiovascular or cerebral vascular disease, which just happened to occur at the workplace. And then we would seek advice from doctors to consider whether the workplace condition would lead to the death. Now, concerning whether we should include some other diseases as occupational diseases. The Labor Department has been keeping tab with the latest study internationally. Now, we follow the definition of occupational diseases set down by the International Labour Organization. The two main factors are whether the disease is caused by a certain level of exposure to a risk element at work. And second, whether the risk of contracting the disease is higher than the ordinary population. Now, concerning back pains and lower limbs injuries, there are a number of reasons, including the employee's age, the individual's inherent conditions or body weight. These diseases are quite common even among the ordinary population, so they haven't met the threshold for inclusion in the list of occupational disease warranting compensation. But we will keep tab with international studies and local cases. If there are other diseases meeting the threshold, we will include them on the list. Mr. Peter Shiu. Thank you, Chairman. Every life is to be treasured. So this is an annual exercise for this panel to discuss how we can improve the occupational safety for employees. Back in 2023, I remember we met with some labor organizations, and it is their opinion that the penalty levels are too low. So there were suggestions. So the suggestion was to increase the $500,000 fine to $10 million so as to enhance the deterrent. We hope that the number of fatality would decrease. Now, since the passage of the law, several years on, we still see fatal accidents happening. So we have taken a lot of measures to reduce the occurrence of accidents, but there has not been a significant decrease in those numbers. So what more can we do? Deputy Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Peter Shiu. Mr. Shiu is correct. In 2023, after discussion between the labor sector and the LegCo, proposals have been made to enhance the penalty level. That's for ordinary penalties and also penalties under the ordinary liability clauses. And also we have added the category of indictable offences to deal with extremely serious offences. So forgive me for not quoting the statistics again. They have been listed in the paper. So we have been advertising about the enhancements in penalty level to employers and also the employees. Employees are also subjectable to prosecutions if they do anything to endanger themselves or their colleagues. Indeed, there have been cases where employees have been prosecuted. But prosecution is the last resort. As mentioned by the Secretary, there are several things that we are focusing on. Now, for the Labour departments, we enforce the law, we draft appropriate codes for the trade to follow. Publicity and education is also our job. So every year we have been investing resources to conduct publicity and education together with our partners, including OSHC. We are also enhancing the performance of training course providers. Now, concerning technology, we are now encouraging the use of the 4S system. Now, in some sectors, the OSH situation has been improved by replacing manual procedure with technology. We will continue to step up inspection so as to continue to improve the OSH performance. Any follow-up question? Yes, Chairman. As mentioned by the Deputy Commissioner, there was an exercise in 2023. Actually, I disagree with the move. Now, it's true that the fine level should be enhanced because it hasn't been increased for 20 years. But $10 million is too much. So back then, I disagree with that steep increase because that doesn't mean that we can eliminate accidents altogether. Now, evidence speaks for itself. Accidents are accidents. They will always happen. So publicity is more important. So by publicity, I didn't mean that we need to remind employers that you will be fined $10 million if you breach the rules. You need to remind the contractors and the employees within their own specific area of work. Getting a green card doesn't mean that you are safe. So I hope the government can keep up with your work. And I applaud the heat stroke guidance notes. Now the cooling vests with fans are very useful. Now during lunch, I see workers with a very bulked up suit. That's because of the vest. The fans are keeping the workers cool during heat weather, so I'm very pleased to see that. I agree that we should use more technologies to protect the welfare of workers. So if employers are kept safe and healthy, it would prevent a lot of disputes between employers and employees. Yes, I agree that we need to step up on our publicity efforts. So we welcome member suggestion on how we can do that. Now, those cooling vests with fans, the OSHC has procured a large batch of cooling vests for SMEs and has been selling them at a discounted price. Mr. Ng Woon Kit, thank you. Now, there's been a 2-week-long special inspection, a campaign with some 240 cranes investigated. Now, some 120 suspension or improvement notices have been issued and some 40 prosecutions have been initiated. So it seems that for one in every two tower cranes is operating below the standard of the law. So how can we plug this loophole? Now the Development Bureau is promoting the use of the 4S system. So how many construction sites have been installed with the 4S system, including crane monitoring system and also anti-collision systems? Deputy Commissioner, now concerning the 4S system, it is a very diverse technology because there are different conditions in construction sites. Some sites comes with tower cranes. Now, there are different components in different 4S systems suiting the construction site's needs. So the point is we have to make sure that the 4S systems work and that they actually help the management of the construction sites to prevent unsafe behaviors. Now concerning tower cranes, there is a new technology which will also result in updating the codes of practice. Now, because of the technology advancements, crane operators no longer have to climb all the way up to the crane and sit there for hours at length. It's not good for health. Now, with the new technology, operators can work from the comfort of a container on the ground to remotely control the tower crane with the assistance of video cameras. Now, both public and private construction sites are already using remote cranes. So we have been advising the users on the OSH of this new technology, and we will also update the codes of practice to reduce accidents involving cranes. Mr. Wan. Thank you. Concerning the special operation against cranes in late March, now we have identified a problem. The actual setup and the data of the tower cranes are inconsistent with the data submitted to the Labour Department on the forms. So we have ordered the suspension of work until we can confirm which set of data is correct. So we have been very decisive in enforcing the law. So during that special operation against crane operation, much work has been done. Mr. Jonathan Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 42 of the paper states that the catering business is the industry with the highest prevalence of industrial accidents that involves slipping, falling, and injuries involving carrying objects. So of course, publicity and education is important. But in terms of figure, despite a declining trend, there is still the core issues of the lack of safety culture. Now there is an OSH star restaurant scheme providing some subsidies in the sum of $14,000 for applicants to engage consultancy service for OSH. So how many quota places are there left in the subsidy? Can you encourage more catering business to apply for the scheme? Now the Labour Department has created many short videos for OSH. However, they did not reach our employees and businesses. So may I suggest the Labour Department targets the middle to top management to show these clips.
Deputy Commissioner, we're more than willing to work with the industry. Over the past few years, we haven't been able to make major breakthroughs. So maybe I can talk to the industry and Mr. Leung about promoting occupational safety and health in the F&B industry. This industry is characterized by a high number of accidents, even more accidents than in the construction sector, but the injuries tend to be more minor, so someone twisted their ankle or someone has a slip or twisted their back. Still, we want to avoid those accidents. We will keep up with the publicity. If there are ways for us to take a more targeted approach so that we can get the message across, we're happy to hear such views, and we can talk to the OSHC about how they can deploy resources and how we can work together, meaning the Labor Department, the OSHC, and the industry can work together. We are willing to give thought to such ideas. So that concludes the questions and answers for this item. We thank the Deputy Commissioner and the LD for joining us. Next item, implementation of the subsidy scheme for abolition of MPF offsetting arrangement. We invite the government officials to join us. Members who wish to speak, please press the Request to Speak button now. Deputy Commissioner for Labor will take us through the paper LC, paper number CP bracket 1482/2026 bracket 04. Over to you, Deputy Commissioner. Thank you. Members, we're here today to brief members on the implementation of the subsidy scheme for abolition of MPF offsetting arrangement. Last May, on the 1st of May last year, the government implemented the abolition of the Mandatory Provident Fund offsetting arrangement. We want to help businesses adapt to this policy change. So on that day, the government also launched a 25-year scheme involving $33 billion. So that's the subsidy scheme. This scheme will cover part of the expenses related to the severance pay and the long service pay after the change. So after the employers pay the severance pay and the long service pay after the transition date, the employer will be able to apply to the scheme for the subsidy. There's a funding ratio for the severance pay and the long service pay. This ratio will decrease over time. The point is to help the employers adapt to the change. There's a line drawn at $500,000 for the subsidy. Now, for the accumulative net amount of the post-transition portion of the severance pay or long service pay, the subsidy will be longer and come in larger amounts. In the first 9 years after the transition, there's also a cap on the amount within the first $500,000. The employer in each case will only have to pay the capped amount. For the first 3 years, the capped amount is just $3,000. The remainder will be fully borne by the government. After the abolition, if this employee will see fewer accrued benefits than before the abolition, this employee will also be able to apply to the scheme to make up for the difference. The Labor Department has appointed a processing agent to set up a service center. So they look at the details submitted by the applicant and then they vet the application. The processing agent will also double-check a certain number of the cases approved for audit, that to make sure everything is in line with the rules. As at April this year, meaning a year after its launch, 23,444 applications were received from employers. Among them, 17,873 were approved. Total subsidies disbursed reached $56 million. We also received 15 applications from employees to make up for the difference in the accrued benefits. 2 of them have been approved. The total subsidy granted is roughly $12,000. As for the other applications, those are under processing. To help employers familiarize themselves with the subsidy scheme, the government has started extensive publicity to raise awareness among employers and employees of this abolition. 43 briefing sessions were held as of April this year with over 18,800 participants. The LD will continue to supervise and monitor the operation of the subsidy scheme. 5 years after the abolition, we will also review the scheme. Thank you. 5 members have pressed the button. Let's do 5 minutes for each member. Dr. Alvin Lee. It's been almost a year since the abolition of the MPF offsetting arrangement. 23,000 applications were received. 18,000 or so cases were approved. And then there are also unsuccessful cases. For these rejected applications, they make up 8% of the total. 756 were rejected. And 813 applications were withdrawn. Do we know why? Do we know the reason for these rejections and withdrawals? Is it because the employers didn't understand how the application worked? What can we do to help these employers to make life easier for them? Now, for employees, we have just a small number of applications from employees, so the same questions apply. Is it because employees don't understand their own rights? Do we need more publicity? We have contracted out the scheme to a processing agent, and this scheme will go on for 25 years, involving a huge amount. Is appointing a processing agent a long-term arrangement? What's the administrative fee like? What's the division of work like between the government and the processing agent to ensure smooth operation and a good outcome? Deputy Commissioner. Thank you.
就住僱主提出嘅申請
On applications from employers, some of their applications were rejected. Our scheme is there to support employers who are affected by the abolition of the MPF offsetting arrangement. In some applications, there is exemption for the employees. That means The employers do not have to make MPF contributions for those employees, and then for other employees, they don't qualify for severance pay or long service pay under the employment ordinance. So for rejected applications, they may have to do with the circumstances of the employees. Maybe the employees do not qualify. They don't meet the requirements, so those applications were not granted. On applications from employees, we have been sharing information through different channels. On our website, we have a calculator and also reference materials for employees to determine the total amount of accrued benefits they're entitled to after the abolition. So do they lose out because of the abolition? Are they affected? They will be able to find out based on the information we provide. We offer the information and the tools for them to assess their situation. For employers and employees who have questions about the procedures, they can contact the processing agent. There's a hotline for them to ask questions. And then we will be able to provide information to help employers and employees. On the processing agent, Ms. Queenie Tang can tell us more about the processing fee in a moment. We have hired a processing agent. That contract will be 39 months in duration, 3 months in preparation period, and then for the remaining 36 months, that processing agent will be processing the applications. This approach, involving a processing agent assisting us with vetting the applications, with the government supervising, overseeing the work, we keep an eye on the overall implementation of the scheme. This approach is what we consider appropriate. After a while, we will review the situation. In future tendering exercises, we can consider adjustments or enhancements. On the administrative fee, Ms. Queenie Tang, the Chief Labor Officer, can elaborate on this point. Thank you. The service fee covers a preparation fee and also a service charge every month. The processing agent vets applications. They also undertake other forms of work, such as addressing inquiries, performing audits, and also handling complaints. The processing agent has to follow the Labor Department's requirements on internal audits. Apart from the preparatory or preparation fee, we pay the agent every month for the work I've mentioned. It's a fixed service charge. If there is extra work going beyond the scope of the original contract, we pay the agent extra. So there are 2 tiers of service charges. Mr. Jonathan Leung.
Thank you, Chairman. Since the 1st of May last year, the abolition of MPF offsetting arrangement has been put in place. So in that year, many of my constituents were worried. So despite the 500,000 cap set, for the part exceeding that $500,000, in particular for corporations hiring a lot of long-term employees, the ratio would be lower. Now, for the first $500,000, there would be a certain threshold. However, For the remaining parts, the employers have to bear some 15% of the burden. That's some $150,000. Now, during this transformative period, many businesses are short of cash. Now, the employers have to pay the long service payments or severance payments first before applying for the subsidy, and it hurts the cash flow of the businesses. So the government established a mechanism to allow disbursements in batches. For example, the first $500,000 to relieve the cash flow strain of the businesses first. How will the government help tie over the businesses in this difficult time? Deputy Commissioner, I thank Mr. Leung for his questions. Now, the design of the subsidy scheme is the product of years of discussion with stakeholders, including council members. And that's how we have this final product. The line was drawn at $500,000 because we were targeting small and medium enterprises as our beneficiaries. SMEs account for the majority of our businesses, so that's why we drawn the line at $500,000. Now, concerning the actual application process. Now, under the Employment Ordinance, the employer has a statutory time period to pay the long service payments and severance payments to the employees. So we would only disperse the subsidy after the employer has discharged their statutory obligations in paying the employees those amounts. We think that would be a more appropriate arrangement. Of course, the government has promised that after the abolition of the offsetting arrangement, we would monitor the situation, including the number of applications for the subsidy scheme and also the number of applicants. Now, we have promised a review after 5 years' time, and by then we will report to members and listen to members' further views on the arrangement. Mr. Peter Shiu. Thank you, Chairman. Now, concerning the abolition of the offsetting arrangement, $33 billion have been set aside to help the business sector during the transition period. So I thank the government for that. The scheme has been opened and some applications have already been made. Now, under the new arrangement, for businesses who require the scheme, is the government aware of the number of businesses who are eligible who are eligible for the scheme, and will there be businesses being left behind because they are not aware that they are eligible for the scheme? Deputy Commissioner. Now, the scheme is a very important piece of policy. Now, it has been widely discussed in society before it was implemented on the 1st of May last year. We have conducted a very comprehensive publicity territory-wide campaign. So besides advertisements and online media platforms, we have also made announcements in public interest and also reached out to stakeholders through trade bodies. So employers have been well informed concerning the implementation of the scheme. They are aware that there would be a subsidy scheme in tandem with the abolition. So 1 year on, we will continue to remind employers and employees about the existence of this subsidy scheme, which could help affected employers and employees. Any follow-up question? Yes, Chairman. So does that mean that for companies, for whatever reason, like business closure or layoff, they could use the MPF contribution for offsetting the payments? Now, under the new regime, the government has a subsidy scheme in place. So say some employees are leaving the company, but they are not aware of the existence of the subsidy scheme. So those companies, those employers, pay it out of their own pockets without applying for the scheme. Are there any such cases? Deputy Commissioner. Thank you. Now, I understand the concern raised by Mr. Xu. As I've said, we have conducted a very extensive publicity campaign to remind employers about the existence of this continuous scheme. Now, for employers who pay long service payments or severance payments out of their own pockets without applying for the scheme, so far, we are not aware of these cases, and there's no way for us to reach out to these employers. So we don't have the number here. We think the most important thing is to raise the awareness of the scheme by other channels. Mr. Xu, that's my question. There is a chance that some employers are really unaware of this scheme and they would have missed out this subsidy during the transitional period. Now we hope that you can step up publicity or even send letters to micro and small and medium enterprises, especially those micro SMEs which are tax paying. So for all the employers who are not aware of the news, they may really don't know about the scheme. So I hope the government can reach out to them. Any supplement? I thank Mr. Chiu's suggestion. Mr. Lam Chun Sing, the Deputy Chairman. Thank you. Now, Mr. Peter Chiu mentioned about the possibility of enterprises not applying for this scheme. Now, I think that's very probable. Now, 1 year on, there are some 20,000 applications. Now, according to previous papers, you estimated that in the first 3 years, there would be more than 90,000 applications each year. Now, if you look at the MPFA's annual report, there are some 50 to 60,000 cases of offsetting each year. So 20,000 applications are on the low side. So some businesses may think that the amount is not very substantial. That's why they save themselves the trouble to apply for the scheme. So when companies offset the amount with the trustees, the trustees would be the point of contact. So maybe you can ask the trustees to notify the employers that they are eligible for applying for this scheme. Now, according to the paper, there are a dozen of cases where employees applied for the subsidy to make up for the shortfall. Now, the Federation of Labour's Unions are also aware of these cases. For some cases, for some rare special cases, the amounts entitled would be lower even after the abolition of offsetting. offsetting arrangement. That includes cases where there is a substantial pay rise after the abolition, and that the employment period before the abolition is much longer than the period after. So these are very special cases, and very often the employees are not aware of these cases. So the Labour Department or the processing agents calculates the amount on the employee's behalf. At present, you are relying on the employees themselves to apply for the subsidy to make up for the shortfall. So can you do that on their behalf? Deputy Commissioner, thank you for the two questions. First of all, concerning the number of applications from employers. Before the subsidy scheme was launched, we have appointed an independent actuarist. They have analyzed the data kept by the MPFA and came up with an estimated amount. Now, looking at the actual situation after the implementation of this scheme, you may be aware that we have a very massive publicity campaign to alert society as a whole, including employers and employees, that something big is coming. That is the abolition of the MPF offsetting arrangement. So after the employers have paid the long service payment and severance payment, in the initial period, that's the first year after the implementation, there's still a part of accrued benefits available for offsetting. So the difference was not significant in the initial period. So some employers are also making voluntary contribution to the account. So they can still use the voluntary portion to offset the long service payments or severance payments. So the most important thing is that employers are aware of the existence of this scheme, which can help them. So we have streamlined the application process as best we can. For example, we have a website. Applications can be made online. We are making it more convenient for employers to make applications. So whenever there are LSP or SP required to be paid, they can apply for this scheme easily. Now, concerning employees, as mentioned by the Deputy Chairman, after the abolition of the arrangement, if the aggregated amount entitled to the employees is even less than before the offsetting arrangement is abolished, well, these are very special cases, but we have prepared for that. We have several questions on our website for the employees to ask themselves so as to understand whether they would fall within these very special cases. So besides these simple tools of analysis, we also have an online calculator, that's the EasyCal, for employees to calculate the aggregated amounts entitled by them before and after the abolition. If there are any questions, they can approach the office of the processing agents. They will be given assistance to ascertain the actual amounts of the aggregated benefits.
Follow-up questions? No? Mr. Lam Wai Kong. Thank you, Chairman. Now, with the abolition abolished, the number of applications falls below that expected by the government. There was a major publicity effort to tell people about the abolition. Can we have another round of publicity specifically about this subsidy scheme? Can we just tell employers about this website, this subsidy scheme? As Mr. Lam Chun-sing said, in those rare cases involving employees, the concept is complicated. Can we present the information in straightforward ways to tell employees that they may fall within those cases so that they can come forward with applications? The FTU worked with the Seamen's Union on a case where an application from a seaman was refused. So the offsetting continued for that seaman. Can we review cases where the workers in Hong Kong, but they cannot benefit from the abolition of the offsetting arrangement? Can we review that? Deputy Commissioner, thank you. On publicity, the LD will continue the publicity effort. In our future efforts, we will take a more bespoke approach. We will tell people about the subsidy scheme. We will target both the employers and employees. So we can highlight certain points, say an employee with a major change to their wages before or after the transition date, so that the employees can think about whether they fall within those cases. We will continue to promote this subsidy scheme, targeting both employers and employees. Now, on the case involving the seamen, the Assistant Commissioner and labor unions had an exchange about this. Ms. Agnes Chung can tell us more about this. I thank Mr. Lam for his question. We had a meeting where we discussed this case in detail. This subsidy scheme has a clear goal. It's there to assist employers with the accrued benefit in its use for offsetting against the severance pay and long service pay. Employers affected by the abolition will get financial assistance. This scheme is there to meet part of the expenses for the severance pay and the long service pay after the abolition. For employees who do not qualify for the MPF or simply fall outside the scope of the employment ordinance. So there is no offsetting for this employee, and that means there was no extra expenses arising from the abolition for this kind of employee. Several kinds of workers fall within these exempted categories, meaning the employment ordinance does not apply to them, meaning family members of the employer and also workers in certain categories, and also workers subject to contracts outside Hong Kong under Cap 78. Under Cap 478 Merchant Shipping Seamen Ordinance, for seamen covered by crew agreements, they are not covered by the employment ordinance. So that's my reply. Thank you. Anything to add? No? Any other question? Mr. Woodkid. So the scheme has been operational for a year. The number of applications is on the low side. So that's less than 2/3 of the number expected. Do we have a mechanism for reviewing the work of the processing agent? So we pay the agent the fee based on the certain number of applications. If we keep getting a low number of applications, is there a way for us to review the fee so that we can save on the service payment? How long does it take the agent to approve a case? Deputy Commissioner. I thank Mr. for the question. On the service fees for the agent, as Ms. Queenie Tang said, there are two parts to the component. First, there's the fixed fee. We look at the performance of the agent over 3 years. We look at the volume of applications expected over 3 years rather than the number of applications received in 1 year. Next year, there may be a spike in the number of applications. We will keep an eye on it. We struck a balance in anticipating the service volume. We look at the number over 3 years. It's not like we expect 90,000 applications in each of the 3 years. We assume a slightly smaller number. We make sure that public money is spent in a prudent way. On the processing time for each application, there is a key performance indicator. If the employer submits all the information, the pledge is that we can complete the processing and disperse the subsidy within 30 working days. For successful cases, each application took less than 30 working days. It took roughly 2 weeks or just above 2 weeks before the disbursement reached the employers. No follow-up question. Other questions? If not, we have concluded this item. We thank the Deputy Commissioner and his team. Any other business? No other business today. I adjourn the meeting. Thank you.